Let's get back to the Ultimate Warrior, though. You guys did a really great job building this up here. If you think back to kind of how this all started, Macho Man attacks the Ultimate Warrior on main event, and then Sherry appears at the Royal Rumble during an interview segment with the Warrior and begs for a title shot for Macho Man. Later in the night, she distracts the Macho Man, or she distracts the Warrior, and Macho Man sneak attacks him during his match with Sergeant Slaughter. A few minutes later, back when they're, back ringside, Macho Man really lays it in with a scepter shot on the head of the Warrior, allowing Slaughter to get the pin and become the world champion. And so they start to promote this as the first time ever for a career-ending match in the WWF. Do you remember a career match prior to this in the WWF, or is this just the first big-time one on pay-per-view?
Not that I remember. It was the first one on big time pay per view. That's for sure.
So who pitches this idea? Do you remember?
Well, Randy was, looking to take some time off.
He's fresh on a broken thumb here. I don't know if you remember that, but he had just broken his thumb. He's got 2 pins in there.
I don't recall that, but Randy was definitely looking for some time off and to take a break, and he had been running hard.
And so when you say take a break, he just wanted to come off the road for a little bit and be a spokesman for the company. He wanted to do commentary, or do you remember what the real plan was at this time?
I think at the time it was to be a spokesman, but actually at the time was for him to take some time off and get away from the business for a little while and then come back and be a spokesman. And then, I don't know that it was ever necessarily one of the things I hate about stipulations like this is I don't think that it was ever really the intention that Randy was going to retire and be gone forever. There was always the thought that, well, he'll be back.
Yeah, Meltzer, I know you love this, but
Jesus.
He suggested that, maybe one of the ideas would be there would be like a letter writing campaign to get Macho Man reinstated. And you guys would request, if you'd like for him to be reinstated, send your, note to blah, blah, blah as a way to capture addresses for mailing addresses so you guys could send them catalogs and stuff and market stuff. And he certainly did something like that the year before with the tugboat Hulk Hogan situation.
Yeah, definitely. We did do that.
Whose idea was that? 'Cause that's pretty genius.
I would imagine probably Vince's. I don't know.
That's a really, really great idea.
Bob Collins, Vince, I don't know.
Okay, so let's get into the match. Sherry and Macho Man are carried out on thrones for this. It's a pretty cool spectacle. Any memories of that idea, or maybe funny stories of carrying them around, maybe mishaps or guys who went on to be something like Cena was with Punk at that one WrestleMania, or DDP was for the Honky Tonk Man?
I don't think any of the guys that carried Randy out that night went on to any kind of stardom, but it was, the sedan, as we called it.
The sedan.
Yes, it was a sedan, and
it looked heavy.
It was. It was heavy without anybody on it.
Yeah.
And then you add 2 human bodies on it, and it got a little tricky sometimes. And those guys were always afraid for their life that they may dump Randall or Sherry somewhere. And Randall, babies.
Warrior trunks have been a topic of debate here for a long time amongst us fans. The rumors and innuendo on the back of his trunks that night were the World Wrestling Federation heavyweight title, and the words means much more than this. And a lot of people said that was a way of taking a dig at him either not being in the main event or the title picture, or trying to stress that his match was more important. Dig or no dig?
Well, I think it's silly that anyone would even think it's a dig, because you're talking about the context of the match. You're talking about someone's career versus a championship. And giving importance to that match, his career meant more than a championship.
Right.
So it was just simply, in the context of the match, the career and the warrior and all that to him was much more important than a belt or a championship. That's all it meant.
This is the first time we saw the Ultimate Warrior wear a duster that I remember, and commentary makes a really big deal about his knee pads having a picture of Macho Man's face on one and his on the other. is this a little bit of a ripoff of Rick Rude? Rude really made this famous, having airbrushed gear custom for the match. That's what kind of this felt like to me. Would you disagree?
I don't know yeah, I don't know. I mean,
okay, this is fun. So Sherry was decked out.
Well, I know. I mean, you're asking me, was I in Jim Hellwig's head to know that he was going to get back at Rick Rude and go to an airbrush?
I never said it was getting back at. I wanted to know if the boys thought, oh, he's doing the Rude gimmick. It was kind of his gimmick at the time.
Was he there? Was he there?
Fuck this.
Was he there?
No,
he had gone,
no.
so it wasn't his gimmick there anymore. So. He wasn't there for anybody to compare to. And, Rob Van Dam did it. So was Rob Van Dam a rip-off of Rick Rude?
Yes.
Okay.
Glad we had this talk. Rob Van Dam didn't wear his opponent's stuff and make match-specific stuff.
Okay.
All right. Never mind. This isn't so much fun sometimes. Sherry was decked out this night.
Feel my pain.
I always thought she never got her just due. What can you, as somebody who was there, testify that Sherry really meant to the matches?
Oh, Sherry was great. The boys, if you ask any of the boys who they'd rather work with, all of them would rather work with Sherry Martel. She was...
Rather than
anybody.
Okay.
You could have a match with Sherry. She'd sell and make you sell, and it'd be believable. But Sherry was a huge integral part of the Macho King and the Queen, sensational Queen Sherry. She just was great at everything she did. She added to that package. She reacted to every little thing and accented the match and didn't steal from it.
These guys would wrestle the next year at SummerSlam, and looking back at this match, I still think this particular match is the best match of the Ultimate Warrior's career. Would you agree with that?
Probably so. Probably the best match Warrior ever had.
So I want to kind of talk about some of the match. Cool spot here. Randy does a crossbody. Warrior catches him, but stands him up and then slaps him. It really added to the story that, Warrior's the bigger, stronger guy. And around this time, Gorilla starts really reiterating, this is the largest pay-per-view audience in the history of pay-per-view. There's no way he would have known that at that point, right? This is just a line from Vince.
I'm sorry, you're asking me to tell you what line Vince gave? No. You know what that was in reference to? Was we were broadcasting that to the troops
I see.
all over the world. So the audience was the largest audience because of the number of troops and where we were broadcasting. We broadcasted it for free on the Armed Forces Radio or whatever.
Yeah.
We broadcasted it live all over the world, and so the audience was huge. As far as pay-per-view buys, no, at that time it was WrestleMania 5.
We're never getting away from the way you split hairs here, just so you know.
Well, no, the audience was the largest.
I get that.
It was because we were broadcasting.
What does it sound like we're talking about right now, though? It sounds just like attendance and tickets
sold.
No,
it's that's what you choose to pull out of it. He said it was the largest pay-per-view audience, and you're saying, well, was it pay-per-view? You didn't say pay-per-view buys. So it was the largest pay-per-view audience.
How is it pay-per-view if no one's paying?
Because that's what we referred to them as.
So
that's how we referred to the events. It's a pay-per-view event.
Okay.
So because it's a pay-per-view event,
should have just been a per-view.
It was broad.
There's no pay, so he should have just said this is the largest per-view audience in the history of per-view. But it wasn't.
Yeah,
anyway.
It was.
No, it wasn't.
Yes, it was.
Sherry's wearing some super revealing stuff here, and I think around this time she started to really push the edge with some of her outfits, thongs and stuff like this. Is it fair to say this is like the precursor for the Attitude Era? There was a series of matches here where she would be stripped down to bra and panties and stuff like that, and that was kind of pushing the edge here for WWF at the time. Do you remember that being a conscious decision, and who would have been the person who says, why don't we show a little cheek here, pal?
Well, a lot of that usually was Sherry's volunteering it. But I don't think there was necessarily a conscious effort to go, let's do bra and panties. As a matter of fact, it was probably the other way, kind of shying away from that.
Right.
But I know Sherry always used to like to do that, and I never liked the guys putting their hands on women anyway. In general, that's tough to sell. It's just a tough sell. I don't care where you are and what you're doing. Heel, babyface. That was always the excuse. Well, she's a heel, so it's okay to do whatever you want to, too.
Whose excuse was that?
That's everybody's excuse. It would be the talent's excuse to say, well, she's a heel. You can go ahead and get away with it. And because the audience popped, it's okay. She's a heel. It's okay. I just never liked it, but, sometimes they did it.
Warrior pushes Sherry here when they're on the outside. Pushes her pretty hard and pushes her down, and it's not even addressed at the time. So what you're saying holds water. Well, is this the first time you remember this many finishing moves being used over and over and over and it not finishing? It feels a lot like now you see guys hit a move a dozen times and then they still kick out. But back in those days, it was
unique because usually when a guy hits his finisher, that was it, and you work to the finish. And these guys wanted to do something different, and career match that they wanted to make it special and just be able to go out and make it different.
It's time for the pin now, and after all these finishing moves, Warrior wins with just a foot on the chest for the pin. Your thoughts?
Hated it. I thought it was disrespectful to Randy Savage, the performer. I thought it was disrespectful to Randy Savage, the man. I also believe that it was probably Randy Savage's call. Knowing Randy. And knowing how Randy was a firm believer of win him in the ring, lose him in the ring. You win him 1, 2, 3, you lose him 1, 2, 3, right in the middle. And I could see Randy basically anointing the Warrior and saying, you know what, beat me, stand over me, and be the man. Because Randy knew what was coming afterwards, so it was simply a way to get Warrior over.
As if that's not enough, Warrior takes a victory lap around to the corners, and then again comes back to the center to put a foot on the chest. This time posing with the duster on. It just seems a little disrespectful to not only pin him with one foot, but to make a victory lap, throw your shit on, and then do it again.
Well, it is, to me. And I think that the talent at the time, here I am defending Warrior, I think the talent at the time, everybody knew what was going to happen next and felt that Randy was going to have his moment at the end. So get your moment now and then move on, and Randy gets his moment at the end. And it did work.
It did.
It did work. But as you and I watched it, I even told you that when we were watching it, I thought that was, it rubbed me wrong. I knew what was going to happen.
I'm curious the thinking that goes into what happens next. Sherry attacks the Macho Man after the match. She's upset that he's lost, seemingly, because of the impact it'll have on her career. And then, of course, Liz, who they showed in the crowd, a good ways away from the ring, 2 rows back down the aisle. She comes to the rescue and throws Sherry out of the ring by her hair, and the crowd goes nuts for them to reunite. Women in the crowd are crying everywhere, and then they reunite, and he embraces her, puts her up on the shoulder, and then when it's time for them to leave, he used to make her hold the ropes open for him, and this time he opens them real big for her. And the replay they show on the pay-per-view isn't of the match at all, but it's of him picking her up. So he started the match as a heel, worked as a heel, cheating and chairs and all this stuff. But then Liz comes back to him, so now he's a babyface. Has this ever happened before? It's a pretty interesting dynamic that a guy can, start as a heel and work as a heel the entire time, but because a woman likes him, he's a babyface.
Well, I mean,
it really speaks to the power of Liz.
It spoke to the power of the couple.
Mm-hmm.
It spoke to the package of Randy and Elizabeth through the years. That was a unit that, God, they were iconic. Huge heels, huge baby faces, and
Liz was never really a heel.
No, but she managed Randy as a heel, and as a package they were heels. And it just was, come on, man, they were iconic, and everyone loved Liz. She said even as a heel they loved Liz. And it was a way to bring them back together. And what people don't know is how devoted Randy Savage was to the business and to the angle when he and Liz split on camera. Randy and Liz in real life were married and got a separation, a legal separation.
Wow.
So that if anybody, would say, oh, well, they're really married. No, they're not. That was Randy's dedication to his art and everything that he did. And Jesus Christ, why we got to do this shit? Last week we were talking about Eddie and stuff, and I told you, and I apologize, folks. The visual of Randy and Liz and Sherry all in the ring together, throw Warrior in there, and they're all gone now, was powerful. And it's even more powerful now when you sit there and you watch that and you see them, and knowing how much Randy loved Liz and vice versa, that to watch that, and you're talking about people crying, man, I cried that night, when it happened. It was at work. It was a beautiful story, but it was also those two coming back together, and it was a beautiful story. And it was what it was, but it worked, and onward and upward.
What do you think made Liz so special? There's never really been a character like her since.
She's quiet, classy. Didn't have to say a lot, didn't say a lot. And she was a beautiful woman, but she also was like that girl next door. So I think she was really relatable and easy to like.